Hey, what's up, guys? Just jumping on here on this 4th of July week. Not a weekend, it's week. It's Wednesday, 4th of July, 2018. And I wanted to kind of just jump on here and hang out with my Helix and then like my Kemper running into the Helix. So there really is no good way for me to show you how this setup is set up other than down here on Kemper Cam. The input to the Kemper is essentially the send from the Helix. So Helix LT send, input Kemper, and then headphone out Kemper into Helix LT return. And that's set up as this block right here. This is the effects loop block. And my Helix LT, let me just move the camera a bit. So here's kind of like my setup, my big computer setup, and then the Helix right here, right? So this button right here controls the Helix blocks I have set up here. So if you look on screen there, that teal send and return went away, and then the Marshall and IR, impulse response, came in, right? So boom, see on screen and see on Kemper Cam, right? That's Kemper, this is Helix. Kemper, Helix, Kemper, Helix, right? Pretty setup, pretty straightforward setup. This is like my hybridized BEOD patch, and essentially, and I really don't know why I even have a Kemper Cam on right now. I mean, I don't have anything going on in the Kemper other than just the Kemper itself. I'm not running any of the effects of the Kemper. I'm not running anything on the Kemper other than just the amp simulation, right? So that's all that's going on. There's no compression, there's no gain pedals. The only thing that's on is amp EQ cabinet, right? That little center block of the Kemper right there. And so let's talk about what profile I'm using. I'm using a free profile that's available on the local library, right? Or I'm sorry, the exchange, the rig exchange. And the profile I'm rocking right now is the JCM 800 Crunch, and this is available for free on the rig exchange on the Kemper Manager rig manager setup. It's by Ricky Storty, right? Ricky Storty. It's a Silver Jubilee, you know, that kind of thing, right? Pretty straightforward amp setup. And so I just, you know, the Kemper does a really good job, in my opinion, of the that I've experienced. Okay, so I've only had it for like 5 or 6-ish months, I think, right? Or maybe a little less, or maybe longer, give or take a month or two, right? Does a really good job with the clean, jangly, sparkly, and crunchy, mid-gainy tones. But when it comes out to like lead, like full-on distortion tones, I've been enjoying my Helix a lot more recently. I just don't know why, right? And so what we're using on the Helix here is the you know, the 2204, which I believe is the 800 or the you know, the Silver Jubilee, who knows, right? I think the Jubilee is 2225 or something like that. Anyways, and then one of my IRs. So this is the EVH available from 5150, number 1 available from, oh, who did I get these from? These are, wow, it escapes me right now. Rosen Digital Audio. Yeah, these are Rosen Digital Audio IRs. So let's get some basic tones in. This is Kemper now. Back to Helix. And so on this setup here, the only thing I'm really running is an inbound compressor, right? And then a little bit of noise gate after the gain stage, like post stage, you know, or pre-stage, right? So I have in the gain stage a button, you know, which is Minotaur, Timmy, and then compulsive drive, the gate, the amp itself, the amp sim, which is that Marshall, and then I have like an out. I do some tricks on Helix here that like magnify my tone. Like for example, this switch right here turns on. Let me delete this. Turns on my 3 Opti trims, and let me demonstrate for you what that's doing, and we'll demonstrate in both Helix and Kemper mode. So here we go. So as you can see, I have an array of OptiTrims here that I run. I run one, so it's like a dry signal coming out of the amp, and then a split signal, which is OptiTrimmed, and this gives it like a modulated curve. And then those both run into the next line down. And then I've got my effects loop, which is the Kemper itself, and then my IR, and then my EQ, which is the calligraphic EQ set to metalhead settings, standard settings, right? Metalhead standard. Then I split the signal again, and I'm going to a delay, a verb, and then a OptiTrim, and then looper, the one-click looper, and then out, and the same thing goes here, right? So delay, reverb, OptiTrim, out. So that's basically what I do. This is like what I do to get my tone more lively sounding. And I personally believe that by having the OptiTrim array in certain key places livens the signal. And you tell me, can you hear it? Tell me yes or no, right? And you got to remember, the OptiTrims are set to 0, right? Look, I'm clicking through all 3 of them. All 3 of them are set to 0 dB increase. They're all set to 1 and 1, and let's hear it. It just adds like a quality to it that I really I don't even know how to quantify that. And I know I have a previous video where I'm kind of harsh on people who don't hear that, but if you can't hear that, I'm sorry. Chances are you're tone deaf. And I recognize the irony. We're doing metal tones and calling someone tone deaf. I get it, right? Yeah. I think the Kemper has better clean tones, but I'm not really a fan of its high gain tones. And I think the Helix and Axe and the other guys, like the new Head Rush, have semi-great lead tones, like heavy lead tones, and really sterile sounding clean tones. And so this is why I have a marriage between the two, right? So ideally, what I would do is I would set my Kemper to be a really nice jangly mid-push tone, like a Tone Junkie profile, something like that, right? Like, and then whenever I want to go to lead land, I just hit the switch, and that disables the Kemper, takes me straight into the Helix, and I'm in lead land. So that's kind of like my logic setting, rationale here going on. And this works for me. Plus, with the Helix, I'm able to add the modulation, those little OptiTrims, and it's my belief that the OptiTrims actually give your signal a little bit of a randomness to it that fools the ear into thinking, oh, okay, it's alive. It's not sterile and static, modeling, right? And the way I liken that is like flicker rate. If you ever look at flicker rate, or frames per second, right? The faster the frames per second, or the faster the light is flickering. If you ever like spin a spoke on a tire with a camera on it, or if you look at helicopter blades on a camera on TV, sometimes the helicopter blades look like they're moving really slow, or the helicopter blade's not moving at all. On an audio technical standpoint, that's how I view this OptiTrim thing. So I really subscribe to it. So enough of the talking. Let's go through some tones, and then let's throw a jam track on. Let's switch back and forth between the Kemper and the Helix, and let's hear what that sounds like. So. Now I know it's probably an unfair competition here with me using the Helix and an IR, and then using the Kemper or whatever cab came with the pack, right? I get it. That's probably not fair. But I can't stand the Helix cabs. They just sound like poop. I just in fact, before I even turned on the camera right here, I experimented putting a cab in there and it just sounded terrible. So whatever. yeah, so that's the base like metal tone, and I have two different sets of reverbs here. Like this switch hits those two reverbs, or that reverb and delay, and then this switch hits that reverb and delay, and they're basically the same, just different timings, whatever, you know, something like that. And it's my opinion that the Helix amp sims and IRs play a lot nicer with the reverbs and delays than the Kemper does for some reason. I've experienced that in the last 30 minutes, and it's like, wow, that's remarkable, and I don't know how to account for it or adjust for it. So, you know, it is what it is. So let's jump to an elevated jam track here. Just on elevated jam tracks here on YouTube, this is the Soothing Atmospheric Groove guitar backing track jam in G. I really like this one a lot. It's actually new, I think. Yeah, I think it came out. Yeah, it came out today. New for today. So let's give it a whirl. So we're gonna start with the Kemper here, and you know, do some reverb, some delay. We'll switch back and forth. Keep your eyes on the screen, and we'll see how that goes. Right. So let me find a way to shrink these together so I can see the jam track notes while playing, and you can see the Helix screen while I'm playing, right? So you can see what's being moved around, what's being turned on. So yeah, we'll just kind of do one of these numbers right here, something like this. Yeah, I really enjoy having both of these pieces of equipment. It's really not an either or for me. It's a why not have both? And you know, it is what it is. So as you can see on Kemper, Helix cam, whatever, screen cam, we're using the Kemper straight up forward, and then we'll go from there, right? I'll turn in some reverb and delay as we go through it, then we'll switch to the Helix. One thing I noticed is that the Helix sounds a lot hairier. Just added some reverb and delay. Switching to the Helix. do you like more? You know, I mean, like, it's so hard for me to say it's this one or that one. There are certain inflection moments in the playing, in the musicality of the playing, if you could call it that, where I feel the Helix is very more present. And then whenever I really dig in, I feel like the Helix is a little aggressive and sharp. And then there's moments where I'm in the Kemper, and it's like, okay, it's a little boxy sounding, but that's how cabs sound, right? Cabs sound like that. And if you've ever had like two separate cabs mic'd with the same mic and you're able to A/B them through the same amp, you'll know what I'm talking about. There's like a mid-profile honk, distortion, rattle, that each cab has its own unique signature identifier for that, right? And that's very easy to quantify by switching through IRs, right? So let's do that. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So, this is just a very simple experiment where I'm going to run through some IRs, and you'll be like, oh, okay, I see what he's talking about. Yeah. So you get the idea, right? How all of these IRs, for the most part, have their own like honky, mid-gritty tone to them, unique signature identifier, right? And once your ear settles into it, it's not a bad deal. And that's one of the things I was noticing just now when I was switching between Helix and Kemper. At first, it was like, ee, and then like my ear would normalize to that tone. And then when I switched back, it's like, ooh, and then my ear would normalize to that tone. It's just a natural thing when you're going through different cabs, going through different profiles, and modeling in reality does a good job modeling that, because when you do have multiple amps or multiple cabs and you switch between them, you'll hear that. It's just that most people only have one cab or one amp or something, or two different types of amp. Like here I have a clean Vox AC30, jingly, jimey, and then I have a PV 6505 MH, right? Whenever you switch between them, the amps are so different, polemically different, that the inflection between the two is expected, and so you don't notice it as much. Whereas when you have the same head running through multiple cabs, you would expect it to react the same between all those cabs, but it doesn't. So that's one of the things that I think most tube amp purists don't understand, because most tube amp purists probably only ever have one head and cab active, as opposed to having a head and multiple cabs where you can switch between those with the miking array and all that stuff. To do that takes a lot of money, and I have that set up, but I just don't use that because it's a lot of cables, it's a lot of upkeep, it's a lot of drama. I prefer the whole modeling, profiling Kemper thing because it's easy. I just turn a knob and I get what I want. So I don't know, what did you think? Did you think the Helix sounded better in context than the Kemper? Also, I wanted to say, were you able to catch what I was talking about with the Opti Trim? Leave a comment below. Tell me what you think about this Opti Trim, business. Do you hear that jump? One of the things having the Helix here is definitely create two paths, right? Two paths here at the very top. Feed them both into this path right here, and then split those two paths after your cab, IR, or whatever you have going on there. Split those two, and then do this Opti Trim array that I have, and you can go crazier with it, right? Like you can put Opti Trims all over the place. It's a very low, system resources thing. And in my opinion, the more Opti Trim you have, and if you set them to different parameters, it's like they're going off and it's like modulating the tone like this. Literally, it's massaging the tone, so when it hits your ears, it sounds more lively. And to me, I sound way more inspired doing that. In fact, on my my Kemper, one of the blocks is actually me using the vibrato trim or whatever to do that, but I can't get nearly as awesome an effect as I can with the Helix, because the Helix has all these blocks, right? This is one of the things where the Helix excels, is having this line. And so that's why I prefer to have both a Helix and a Kemper, so I can do this, right? It's like the best of both worlds put together to have like the best tone. And for me, doing my lead guitar setup stuff, training or whatever it is that I'm doing, having the Helix sometimes is better than the Kemper, but I prefer them. I like them both. Yeah, whenever I switch, it just hits your ears and it's like, oh, what the hell was that? But then your ear normalizes to it. It's just a profile thing, It's just a cab thing. Cabs do that. Anyway, so that's been this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, just kind of, I'm not saying one's better than the other, but using both together certainly is win. And the ability to have the OptiTrem array, totally badass. The ability to have multiple delays, totally badass. The ability to have Kemper profiling in my mix, totally badass. So you tell me what you think, guys. Appreciate it. Rock on. I'll catch you guys next week, and happy 4th of July. Be safe. Stay the hell away from those people who are dangerous today, for sure. All right, guys. Rock on. Catch y'all later.